The Galactic Summit was an event like no other. Aliens from hundreds of different species traveled from across the stars to meet on a neutral planet, exchanging ideas, discussing trade agreements, and finding new ways to work together. Humans had only recently joined the galactic community, but their presence was already making waves. Known for their resourcefulness, strength, and a knack for survival in the harshest of environments, Earth's representatives were always in the spotlight. One of these representatives, a young diplomat named Alex, was about to find himself in the middle of something far beyond what he expected. Alex had been chosen to attend the summit after proving himself in many diplomatic missions. He had already made several successful alliances and was known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. But there was one aspect of the summit that worried him: alien customs. The aliens in the summit came from many different planets, with varying degrees of tolerance for the extreme conditions their homeworlds demanded. Some lived on gas giants, others on planets where the temperature never dipped below freezing. Some were biologically adapted to the harshest environments, while others required special technology to survive in places that would be deadly to most creatures. Alex had heard rumors about a strange custom practiced by one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, the Turalians. The Turalians were known for their incredible toughness. Their home planet was a harsh, volcanic world, and they had evolved to withstand extreme heat and pressure. As a result, they valued endurance and strength above all else. The Turalians had a tradition that Alex had been warned about by his colleagues, a relaxing hot bath ritual. At first, Alex thought little of it. A bath didn't sound like such a big deal, right? The Turalians were known to be friendly, albeit a little intimidating with their towering presence and muscular bodies. They were the kind of species who didn't back down from a challenge and expected the same from others. So when the Turalians invited Alex to take part in their traditional hot bath, he thought it was just a harmless cultural experience. He could handle it. After all, humans were known as Deathworlders, able to survive in environments that would kill most other species without a second thought. Despite his initial hesitation, Alex accepted the invitation. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks, reading up on Turalian customs, learning how to behave at the summit, and making sure he didn't make any cultural mistakes. This would be a test, a chance to prove his worth to the Turalians and the rest of the galaxy. It was an opportunity for a diplomatic breakthrough, and Alex wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. However, as he walked into the Turalian embassy, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. The hallways were lined with smooth, dark stone, and the air felt thick with heat. Everything around him exuded strength. The Turalian ambassador, a massive figure with skin like molten rock, greeted him warmly, his eyes glowing with excitement. "Welcome, human. We are honored to share our tradition with you." Alex smiled, trying to mask his nerves. He had no idea what he was in for. As Alex walked further into the Turalian embassy, he couldn't help but notice the heat. It was different from the usual warmth he was used to on Earth. This heat felt heavy, like it was pressing down on him. The air was thick, and every breath he took seemed to fill his lungs with warmth. It wasn't uncomfortable yet, but it was definitely strange. He looked around at the Turalians, who seemed completely at ease, unaffected by the temperature. Their skin glowed faintly, like it was made for this environment. The Turalians were tall, muscular, and imposing. They moved with confidence, their footsteps echoing in the hall. Alex felt small compared to them, though he was no stranger to being in the presence of powerful beings. He had met diplomats from many species, some of whom had terrifying reputations, but the Turalians were different. There was an air of seriousness about them. They didn't speak much, but when they did, their words carried weight. It was clear they valued strength, both physical and mental. The ambassador, a large Turalian named Rex, had been speaking to Alex about the importance of their traditions. "You will understand, human," Rex had said. "The hot bath is not just a bath. It is a trial of endurance. It is a way to show respect for the strength of our people." Alex had nodded politely, but he didn't fully understand. He had only heard bits and pieces about the ritual, and the more he heard, the more he thought it was just a strange cultural custom. After all, what could a hot bath really do to him? He had survived harsh environments on Earth and had endured extreme temperatures before. If anything, it would be a new experience, something to add to his collection of alien customs. But as the conversation continued, Alex started to notice something strange. A few of the other alien delegates, those who had been around longer than Alex, gave him warning looks. One of them, a tall, silver-skinned being from the Karen species, leaned in close to him and whispered, "You really should reconsider the bath, human. It's not what you think." Alex raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the serious tone. "What do you mean?" he asked, not sure if he was supposed to be worried. The Karen alien hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "It's not just a bath. It's dangerous, for your kind especially. The Tyrellians think it's a test, a challenge. They've never had a human participate before." Alex shrugged, brushing off the warning. "I'm a Deathworlder. I'm sure I can handle a bath." The Karen looked at him for a long moment, a mix of concern and disbelief in their eyes. "If you survive, I will be very impressed," they said before walking away, shaking their head. The comment stuck with Alex, but still, he didn't think it could be that bad. After all, how dangerous could a hot bath really be? He had been through worse, he thought. And this was just a tradition, a way to show respect to the Tyrellians. Nothing more. As he was led into the bath chamber, a room filled with steam and glowing pools of water, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nervous excitement. The Tyrellians were already preparing the bath, and Rax was smiling, his eyes glowing with pride. "Welcome to the ritual, human," Rax said, his voice low but full of excitement. "Let us see if you have the strength to endure." Alex smiled back, trying to mask his growing unease. "I'm ready." The room was unlike anything Alex had ever seen before. It was a large, circular chamber with walls made of smooth, dark stone. The air was thick with steam, swirling around him like a fog. The temperature was already higher than he expected, and it felt like the heat was clinging to his skin. But the Tyrellians seemed perfectly at ease, their glowing bodies reflecting the warm light of the room. Rax, the Tyrellian ambassador, was standing near the largest pool, smiling with a kind of calm confidence. "Come, human," Rax called, waving Alex toward the pool. "This is where you will begin your trial." Alex hesitated for just a moment. The heat was starting to feel more intense now, and he could feel the sweat beginning to form on his forehead. He had been in hot places before, but this was different. The air was thick and stifling, and the warmth seemed to be everywhere, making it hard to think clearly. But he pushed the feeling aside. After all, it was just a bath. How bad could it be? With a deep breath, Alex walked forward, stepping into the pool. The water was hot, really hot. At first, it felt like a normal warm bath, but the longer he stayed in, the more he began to realize just how hot it really was. His skin felt like it was being heated from the inside out. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but it was difficult. The temperature was starting to feel unbearable. The Tyrellians watched closely from the edge of the room, their eyes fixed on him. Alex could feel their gaze on him, and it made him feel uneasy. They didn't speak. They just observed, as if waiting for something. Rax, who had invited him, stood closest, his face showing a slight smile of approval. Alex wondered what they were thinking. Were they expecting him to fail? Was this some sort of test of strength, like they had said? He had no idea, but he was determined not to back down. He couldn't, not in front of them. But the heat kept rising, and Alex felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. His body was beginning to protest, the sweat pouring down his face and stinging his eyes. He tried to keep his posture straight, tried to convince himself that he could take it. After all, He was a human from a death world. He had survived much worse. This was nothing. Still, the longer he stayed in the water, the more his body began to react. His skin burned as though it was being scorched. His heart was racing. He was starting to feel lightheaded, and his legs felt weak, like they might give way at any moment. But he didn't want to admit defeat. Not now. Not when the Turelians were watching. The minutes dragged on, though they felt like hours. Alex's body was fighting the heat, but it was becoming harder to stay focused. The water felt like it was closing in around him, pushing against him, making it harder to breathe. He gritted his teeth, trying to hold on. He had to stay strong. He couldn't let the Turelians think he was weak. But deep down, he began to wonder, what had he gotten himself into? Was this really just a bath, or was it something more? The heat was no longer just uncomfortable. It was suffocating. Alex could feel the water pressing down on him, almost as if it was alive, constantly pushing its intense warmth deeper into his skin. His body was growing heavier with each passing moment. Sweat drenched his clothes, his hands slick and trembling as he tried to keep them steady on the edge of the pool. He was no longer sure how long he had been sitting there, but the minutes felt like hours. His thoughts were starting to blur, and every breath he took felt like it was not enough. He tried to force himself to focus. Just breathe, he told himself, but his breathing was becoming shallow. The air around him was thick with steam, and every inhale felt like he was breathing in fire. It wasn't like any hot bath he had ever taken before. On Earth, he'd experienced hot showers, the kind that left him feeling warm and relaxed. This was nothing like that. The heat wasn't soothing. It was oppressive. His heart was racing now, the pulse pounding in his ears as his body screamed for relief. Don't show weakness, Alex thought, clenching his fists and trying to steady himself. He glanced at the Turelians watching from the side. Their faces were calm, even as they observed him closely. They didn't seem worried. If anything, they looked almost pleased. He couldn't understand it. What were they expecting from him? Why weren't they showing any signs of discomfort? His legs began to feel numb. The muscles were stiff, unresponsive. He tried to shift his weight, but it felt like the water was holding him down, trapping him in place. The dizziness was growing worse, the room spinning as his vision began to blur. His mouth felt dry, and he swallowed repeatedly, trying to ease the sensation. But it didn't help. In fact, it only made things worse. He tried to stand, to step out of the pool, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The water had sapped his strength, and his feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. His hands gripped the edge of the pool, but they were too weak to push himself up. His head swam with confusion, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse into the water. "Stay strong," he whispered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if he believed it anymore. His body was betraying him. The Turelians were still watching, their faces unreadable. He wanted to scream, to ask for help, but he couldn't summon the energy to do it. He had always been known for his strength, his resilience, but now it felt like his body was failing him. How could he survive something like this? As the heat pressed in from all sides, Alex realized with a sinking feeling that he might not be able to take much more. His vision was narrowing, his body trembling with exhaustion. The water that had once seemed like a simple bath was now a cruel force, pushing him to the edge of his limits. He felt trapped, unable to escape, and for the first time, he wondered if the Turelians were right about human endurance. Why isn't this ending? He thought desperately. How much longer can I last? Alex's world had shrunk to just the heat. The water, the steam, the air. It all felt like it was closing in on him. His body was screaming for relief, but every attempt to move felt like it drained more of his strength. His vision was fading, and he could barely hold onto the edge of the pool any longer. He gasped for air, his chest rising and falling rapidly, as though his lungs couldn't keep up. His skin felt as if it was burning, every inch of it tingling with pain. The dizziness was growing stronger, and he was beginning to lose his grip on reality. Out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw something move, a figure approaching him. It was the Karen, the tall, silver-skinned alien who had warned him earlier. They moved quietly, their presence calm amidst the chaos that was enveloping Alex's body. The Karen's face was full of concern as they knelt beside him. "Human," the Karen said in a low voice, their tone serious. "You should not have entered the bath like this." Alex tried to speak, but his mouth was too dry. He could barely make a sound. The Karen continued, their voice soft but urgent. "The Turalians. They do not tell you the full truth. This bath is not just a bath. It's a test of endurance, a test of power. And it is not meant for humans." Alex's mind raced as he tried to process what the Karen was saying. A test. The Turalians had never mentioned that. They had simply called it a relaxing bath. Why hadn't anyone told him the real purpose of the ritual? Was it some kind of trap? Were they expecting him to fail? Before he could ask anything, the Karen placed a hand gently on his shoulder, pulling him back toward the edge of the pool. "You are not like the Turalians. Your body cannot handle this level of heat," they said, their voice softer now. "They do this because they live on a planet of volcanic fire. They are built for it. But you, human, you are not." Alex felt the weight of those words as they sank in. The Turalians had invited him into their ritual, but they hadn't warned him about its true nature. He had thought it was just another cultural tradition, something harmless. But now, as the heat continued to overwhelm him, he realized how wrong he had been. "They did not tell you," the Karen said again, their eyes filled with pity. "But they also expected you to endure. They believe humans can survive anything, that you are invincible." Alex wanted to protest, to say that he was strong, that he could take it, but the words wouldn't come. His body was shaking, and his mind was swimming in a fog of heat. The Karen gave him a sympathetic glance and began speaking to the Turalians, their words soft but firm. "Stop the ritual," the Karen demanded, their voice carrying authority. "This human is not like you. He is not made for this kind of challenge." The Turalians looked at each other, their faces blank, as if they were considering what to do. Rax, the ambassador, stepped forward, his face stern and unreadable. "Is he weak?" he asked, his voice full of pride. "No," the Karen replied quickly, "but his body cannot survive what you are putting him through." Rax paused, and for a long moment, Alex thought he might be left to suffer in the heat. But then the Turalians began to act, their movements swift and decisive. The water's temperature dropped slightly, and the heat in the room began to ease. Alex's breath slowed, and his heart stopped racing. The Turalians had finally recognized that Alex was not made for this ritual. But it was clear now. They hadn't been testing him for strength. They had been testing his endurance, to see if humans could survive the impossible. The room was still warm, but the temperature had dropped just enough for Alex to breathe again. His head was spinning, and his body felt like it had been through a battle. His skin still tingled with the remnants of the heat, but at least the burning had faded. He was shaking, his muscles sore and weak, but he was alive. That was all that mattered now. Alex leaned against the edge of the pool, gasping for air, trying to steady his breathing. His throat felt dry, and his chest ached with every breath. He looked around the room at the Turalians, their faces still unreadable. Rax stood in front of him, watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. The other Turalians watched quietly, their glowing eyes fixed on Alex. What was that?" Alex asked weakly, his voice hoarse. Rax gave a small nod, acknowledging the question. "It was a test, human. A challenge to see if you could endure the heat, like we do." Alex's eyes narrowed as he processed what had happened. A test. They had been testing him, but they had never told him the truth. They had never warned him that the bath wasn't just a bath. It was a trial of survival. The Turalians had expected him to withstand something that no human should have to endure. "I thought it was just a bath," Alex muttered, frustration rising in his chest. "I thought it was just another alien tradition." Rax's expression softened for a moment. "It is a tradition, but it is also a way to test the limits of those who wish to understand us. The Turalians believe that strength is the most important thing in the galaxy. Endurance, power, the ability to survive in harsh conditions. That is why we invited you." Alex looked at the other Turalians, their eyes still fixed on him. But now there was something different in their gaze. It wasn't just curiosity, it was respect. They had been waiting to see if he could survive, to see if he was as strong as the legends of humans suggested. They had never expected him to struggle, but they had also never expected him to break. "I'm not like you," Alex said, his voice growing stronger. "I don't come from a planet like yours. We don't live in volcanic heat or toxic air. Earth is tough in its own way. But I'm not made to survive this." Rahak studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We know. That is why we were impressed by your ability to endure as much as you did." Alex was surprised by the words. He had expected the Turalians to see his struggle as weakness, but they didn't. They saw it differently. They saw his ability to push through the pain, his determination to keep going, even when his body was on the edge of collapse. "You didn't think I'd survived, did you?" Alex asked, his voice suddenly bitter. "You thought I'd break, but I didn't." The Turalians were silent for a moment. Then Rax spoke, his voice calm but firm. "We did not think you would break, but we did not know how far you could go either. You are not like us, and that is what makes humans unique. Your strength is not in the heat or the battle. It is in your will to keep going when everything else says to stop." Alex's chest swelled with a mix of pride and exhaustion. He had survived. He had proven something, even if he didn't fully understand it himself. The Turalians respected his determination, even if they hadn't fully understood it at first. The Karen, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. "You may be weak from the trial, human, but you are strong in ways that the Turalians do not understand. You survived what they could not expect. That is why you are here." Alex didn't know what to say. He was still shaking, still recovering from the ordeal, but hearing the words gave him a strange sense of pride. The Turalians had tested him, but he had survived. That meant something. "I'll remember that," Alex said softly, looking up at Rax. "I'll remember that I'm not like you. But that doesn't mean I'm weak." Alex leaned back, feeling the weight of the Turalian's words settle on him. His body was still sore from the trial, but he was beginning to feel stronger. The cool air in the room helped, and his breathing was slowly returning to normal. His mind, however, was still racing. What had just happened? The Turalians had invited him here expecting him to survive a test of endurance, and although he had struggled, he had proven himself in a way that no one had expected. Rahak stood in front of him, his large figure blocking much of the steam that still lingered in the room. The Turalian ambassador's gaze was steady, his eyes glowing with a strange mixture of pride and curiosity. "You have surprised us, human," he said. "We thought you would fail, but you did not." Alex's heart was still racing, but there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. He had survived, and now it seemed like the Turalians were beginning to see him in a new light. The fact that he was still standing was proof enough that he hadn't been as weak as they assumed. But Rax's next words brought Alex back to reality. "We will not leave it at this, human. The trial was only the beginning." Alex blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Rahak smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "I told you that the bath is a challenge of endurance. But there are other challenges you must face if you wish to prove your true strength. Your body survived the heat, but there is more to strength than physical endurance." Alex felt a knot form in his stomach. He had thought the bath was the worst of it. But now it seemed like he was about to face something even more difficult. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You must face the Turalian gauntlet, Rax said simply. The gauntlet. Alex repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. What is that? Rax's expression darkened. It is a series of trials, designed to push even the toughest of our people to their limits. Only those who survive the gauntlet are considered worthy of true respect. It is not something that can be taken lightly. But you, human, have already shown that you have the will to survive. Perhaps you have the strength to endure it. Alex felt his stomach twist. The heat from the bath had been bad enough. Now he was being asked to face an entire series of challenges, and he had no idea what they would entail. The thought of facing more pain, more tests, made him nervous. He wasn't sure if he was ready for something like this. I didn't come here for this, Alex said, his voice unsteady. I thought I was here to represent my people, to learn about your culture. But now you want me to go through more of your tests. Rax tilted his head, considering Alex's words. You came to prove yourself, he said slowly. You wanted to show that humans are strong, that you are worthy of being part of the galactic community. This is your chance to do that. Alex took a deep breath. He had already proven that he could survive their tests. But this was something else entirely. The gauntlet was not just about surviving. It was about pushing his limits even further. The Turalians believed that strength was the key to everything, and if he wanted to be respected, to be seen as equal to them, he would have to prove it. Fine, Alex said, his voice steady despite the doubts swirling in his mind. I'll do it, but if I survive your gauntlet, I want you to understand something. I'm not like you. I may not have your strength, but I have something else. Something different. And that's what makes humans strong. Rax studied him for a moment, his glowing eyes reflecting a strange mixture of approval and curiosity. Very well, human. You will face the gauntlet. We will see if your strength is enough. As the Turalians prepared the next trial, Alex stood tall. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to give up. He had made it this far, and he would survive whatever came next, because that was what humans did. They never gave up. Alex stood in the center of the Turalian training grounds, the heat still radiating off his body from the previous trial. The gauntlet had been brutal. It wasn't just physical pain that tested him. It was his will, his ability to push through the unthinkable. The Turalians had thrown everything they had at him. Endurance tests, extreme environments, even physical challenges meant to break the strongest of warriors. But he had survived each one. Somehow, against all odds, he had made it through. Now, as he looked around the stone walls of the training area, he saw the Turalians watching him from every angle. Their glowing eyes were filled with a strange respect, but also something else, an understanding. They had expected him to fall, to break under pressure, but Alex had shown them something they hadn't anticipated. Impressive, human, Rax said, stepping forward. The Turalian ambassador's voice was filled with an edge of approval that hadn't been there before. You survived our gauntlet, and you did so without giving in. But survival is only part of the equation. Now you must show us the true strength that lies within you. Alex's chest was still heaving from the last challenge. His body ached, every muscle sore from the grueling tests he had just endured. He wanted nothing more than to rest, to let his body recover. But the Turalians weren't done yet. True strength? Alex asked, his voice hoarse, though his determination burned through the fatigue. What do you mean? Rax studied him carefully, his glowing eyes bright with curiosity. Strength isn't just about survival, human. It's about understanding your limits, pushing past them, and knowing when to fight and when to yield. You survived our trials, but now you must understand that the hardest battles aren't always physical. Alex blinked, trying to wrap his mind around the idea. He had thought that strength was about surviving the hardest tests, about proving that his body could endure. But Rax was suggesting something deeper, something more complicated. I've already proven that I can survive, Alex said, his voice growing firmer despite the exhaustion. I've done everything you've asked, and more. What's left for me to prove? The Turalians remained silent, and Alex began to wonder if they were about to put him through another trial. But Rax shook his head. No more physical challenges, human, he said. What you've shown us is that you possess endurance, but there's something more you need to understand. The true strength you need to prove is not in your muscles or your ability to endure pain. It's in your mind. Rax paused, as if waiting for Alex to process his words. You must show us that you can lead, Rax continued. You have survived our trials, but now we must know if you have the wisdom to use that strength for more than just survival. If you are to be accepted as part of the galactic community, you must be more than just a survivor. You must be a leader. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had thought this was about strength, about physical survival. But now it seemed the Turalians were looking for something deeper. They weren't just testing his ability to survive. They were testing his potential as a leader, someone who could stand alongside them in a galaxy full of powerful beings. I didn't come here to be a leader, Alex said, his voice filled with doubt. I just came to represent my people. I didn't think you'd be looking for something like this. The Turalians stood in silence, observing him, their eyes glowing with a mix of curiosity and expectation. You've already proven that you have the strength to survive, Rax said. But now you must prove that you have the wisdom to lead. If you truly want to join us, human, you must learn that leadership isn't about being the strongest. It's about understanding others, finding common ground, and knowing when to fight and when to listen. Alex stood there, stunned by the weight of Rax's words. The challenge had shifted. It wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about growing, evolving, and taking on a new responsibility. The true test was not physical anymore. It was about his heart and mind, and whether he could rise above survival to become a leader among the stars. Alex took a deep breath, letting the weight of the challenge sink in. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. He had survived the Turalian gauntlet, but now he had to survive something much more difficult. The challenge of proving himself as more than just a warrior. He had to prove that humans had the wisdom and strength to lead. The Turalian embassy was still. The air hummed with the tension of the moment. Alex stood in the center of the room, his body exhausted but his mind racing. After surviving the brutal gauntlet, he had thought he was done. But the Turalians had revealed that their expectations weren't just about physical strength. It was about his ability to lead, to understand others, and to think beyond just surviving. Rax stood in front of him, his glowing eyes reflecting the seriousness of the situation. You've proven your strength, human, he said, his voice steady. But now you must prove your mind. We did not invite you here to see if you could survive pain. We invited you to see if you could lead our people and stand beside us in the galaxy. Alex wasn't sure he understood. He had always thought that strength was the key to everything. But now, as he stood in front of the Turalians, he realized there was so much more to it. He had survived their trials, endured the heat, the physical tests, and the mental strain. But was that enough to gain their respect? Was he truly ready to lead, or was he just a survivor? What do you want me to do? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His muscles ached from the trials, and the weight of the responsibility was starting to feel overwhelming. He didn't come here for this. He didn't come here to be a leader. But if this was what was required, he had no choice but to rise to the occasion. Rax regarded him with a calm expression, the silence between them stretching out. We do not expect you to become a Turalian human. You are not like us. But your people, the humans, have something we have never seen. You have the ability to endure, but more than that, you have the will to fight for something bigger than yourself. The words made Alex pause. He hadn't come here to be a hero. He wasn't looking to be seen as something special. He was just a diplomat, a representative of Earth. But now, the Turalians were asking him to prove that humanity was more than just strong. They were asking him to show that humans could lead, not just survive. "I don't know if I can do this," Alex admitted, the weight of the challenge pressing on him. "I've never been a leader. I've always just tried to get by, to survive." Rahak stepped forward, his massive frame towering over Alex. "That is why you are the one who has been chosen. The strongest leaders are not always the ones with the most power or the greatest strength. They are the ones who understand the value of survival, of living, and of learning from every challenge." Alex stood there, processing the words. Leadership wasn't about being the strongest. It wasn't about winning every battle. It was about understanding others, knowing when to fight and when to let go, and showing compassion and wisdom. As Alex thought about it, he realized the truth in Rax's words. He had endured the worst of the Turalians' trials, but he had also learned. He had learned about their strength, their culture, and most importantly, he had learned about himself. "All right," Alex said, his voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll lead if that's what you want from me. But I'm not perfect. I'm human, and I can't do it alone." Rahak smiled, his expression a rare moment of warmth. "That is what we needed to hear, human. You understand now. Leadership is not about perfection. It is about knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to listen, and knowing when to stand up for what is right." The Turalian ambassador stepped back, and for the first time, Alex felt the full weight of what was expected of him. He wasn't just representing Earth anymore. He was representing something bigger. He was representing humanity's potential to be more than just survivors. He was showing the galaxy that humans could lead, not through force, but through wisdom, strength, and the will to do what was right. As the Turalians watched, Alex stood tall. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to back down. He had already survived the hardest challenges. Now, it was time to prove that humans had the strength to lead. The room was quiet, the tension thick in the air. Alex stood in front of the Turalian council, his body still aching from the tests he had endured. His muscles were sore, his skin still tingling from the heat of the trials, but there was something different in the air now. Something that wasn't just about survival. The gauntlet, the bath, the challenges, all of it had led him here, to this moment, where he had to prove something much more than physical strength. He had to prove that humans could lead. The Turalians were silent as they watched him, their eyes glowing with a mix of curiosity and expectation. They had seen his strength, his endurance, and now they were waiting for him to show them something deeper. Rahak stepped forward, his massive figure imposing as always. "You have done what we did not think possible, human," he said. "You have survived our trials and proven your strength, but you have also shown us something we did not expect. You have shown us the strength of your heart and mind. You are not like us, but you are more than we thought." Alex felt a weight lift from his chest, but at the same time, he knew that this was just the beginning. He wasn't done yet. The Turalians had tested him in ways he hadn't imagined, and now they were asking him to step up as a leader. It was a responsibility he hadn't asked for, but one he couldn't back down from. "I didn't come here to be a leader," Alex said quietly, his voice steady. "I came here to represent Earth, to show that we're more than just survivors. But now, I see that being a leader isn't about being the strongest. It's about knowing when to fight, when to listen, and when to ask for help." The Turalians nodded, their glowing eyes locked on him. Rax looked at him with a hint of respect in his gaze. "You have understood what many never will. Strength is not just in the body. It is in the mind, the heart, and the choices you make. You are ready to lead." Alex felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The weight of the challenges had pushed him to his limits, but now he understood what the Turalians had been testing him for. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about learning, adapting, and growing. The gauntlet had been a trial, yes, but it had also been a lesson. And now he knew what he needed to do. "I will do my best," Alex said, his voice steady, his gaze meeting Rax's. "I may not be perfect, but I will do everything I can to show that humans are more than just survivors. We have the strength to lead, to learn, and to grow." Rex smiled, and for the first time, Alex saw true warmth in the Terralian's eyes. "That is all we ask, human. You have proven that you are worthy of standing beside us." The council members nodded in agreement, and Alex realized that something had changed. The Terralians, who had once seen humans as nothing more than Deathworlders, now saw him as something else. Someone who could lead, someone who could be part of their future. As Alex stood there, feeling the weight of his new responsibility, he knew that this was just the beginning. He had survived the trials, but now he had to prove that humanity could stand alongside the galaxy's strongest. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to face. But for the first time, Alex felt ready for whatever came next. "I'm ready," he said quietly, to himself more than anyone else. "Let's show them what humans can do." And with that, the first step of a new journey began. A journey not just of survival, but of leadership, wisdom, and strength that came from within.